The difference between a dictatorship and a free society doesn't just lie in government or in freedom of speech, it lies in the operation of law. In Nazi Germany, there were no legal restraints on what the state could do. The SS or the Gestapo did not need to fear that the law would punish them for torturing and murdering their victims. According to the so-called Führerprinzip, or leadership principle, which governed Nazi Germany, Hitler alone was the state, and his will was law. And Germany's legal system, its police and law courts, enforced it. Now that is why, when the war ended and Hitler's Germany lay in ruins, it seemed so important to the Allies, after some initial doubts, that the Nazi leaders should be brought before a proper court, with its authority derived from law and its judgments based on evidence. The Nazis were to get what they had never given anyone: a fair trial. The Allies chose Nuremberg for the trial because it had been the heartland of Nazism, the site of those huge Nazi Party rallies. In the town's courthouse, they established the world's first international court to try some of the highest-ranking figures in the Nazi hierarchy for crimes which were so shocking, so beyond human comprehension, that at the time they didn't even have a name. This was the Nuremberg Trial. "80 years later, the Churchill Archives Centre in Cambridge and the UK Historical Association brought together students and their teachers from 6 different countries for an exercise that put those students in the shoes of the prosecutors and the defence lawyers at Nuremberg. Using the same evidence that was available in 1945, the students were tasked with presenting cases for the prosecution or the defence of 8 of the original defendants to a panel of judges. The judges were an international team of lawyers and historians from the United States, Canada, and the UK. Their judgments were to be bound not by what happened at the original trial, but by the quality of the arguments the students put forward. The students came from schools and colleges in the UK, the United States, Canada, Ukraine, France, and, very importantly, Germany. Each school provided a small team of students, some to argue for the prosecution, some to argue for the defence. Nuremberg 80 was organised and hosted by the Churchill Archives Centre in Churchill College, Cambridge. Alan Packwood is the director of the Churchill Archives Centre.
I am keen to hear what made Churchill College and the Churchill Archives Centre want to take on such a monumental project.
Well, it's really what the Archive Centre is all about. We exist to preserve the material in our care so that it's there for future generations, but there's no point preserving it unless you're going to make it available, unless you're going to use it to reach future generations. And that's what I think this event does so powerfully.
The exercise began with an introductory talk about the original trial and a dramatised reconstruction of some of the moments from it. After that introductory session, the students got down to preparing for the trials which would start the next day. How did they find it, working so closely with students from other countries?
You are a student from Ukraine, and this event has brought together students from many different countries and many different schools. How did you find the experience of working with people from all these different backgrounds?
Well, it's always really interesting and really helpful to have this experience of working with international students in big groups because, for example, here we have different law system. We have continental in Ukraine, and in the US it's common law. It's always interesting to see the different points of views and in general how people thinking, because it's history and it's always different points of view, and it's really I would say it's really impressive, and I'm really grateful that we had this opportunity to work with so many international students.
The judge's job was to listen closely to the arguments and to help keep the students focused. This did not necessarily mean making the students' life easy.
So this is a pedagogical experience for the students to encounter the difficult issues of international law, but also to encounter what it means to stand in space, to make an argument around different difficult ideas. Even if you are representing a defendant who you feel is odious in every single way, still, and this is a basic principle of American law, still everyone deserves a defense. So what does it mean? How do you find the way to defend someone who has done the indefensible? These are all challenges that the students are confronting, whether it's organizational, whether it's the historical pieces of it, the political science, the legal pieces of it, also just the learning how to work with other people and how to present what I will call an argument and then stand up in the face of questions. But you were witnessing the arguments this morning and you observed the judges asking some pretty hard questions to the students. And that was not for the purpose of being mean. It wasn't trying to get them to break, but it was trying to help them experience what it's like to be in a courtroom, what it's like to be in a conversation where there are difficult questions asked and difficult issues discussed.
I've got a question for each side. For the prosecution, a very simple question, really. What was Keitel's job?
Keitel's job involved signing the orders that were...
No. I mean, what was his job?
His job was the chief of the Oberkommando der
What does that mean?
That means that he was the chief of the highest military within Germany, and he signed many of the orders. He was responsible for
That's
signing
his
many
position, but what is his, what's his job description? If you went for an interview and he said, okay, I'm going to be head of the German army, what does the head of the German army do?
They would distribute orders that had been created to the military in various parts of Europe.
Well, that sounds like the defence argument, that he's simply passing on orders.
Well, he's not only passing them on, he's also approving them, which is another key aspect of his job. And in approving these orders that were created, he is essentially directly leading to the implementation, and therefore he is directly responsible for the eventual effects.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's important to add that just because that was his job description doesn't mean that's the only thing he did. He wasn't cut out for his job, and that's the exact reason why Hitler chose him to be the head of the UKW.
Although there were witnesses at Nuremberg, much of the original trial was based on documentary sources recovered from German files. Similarly, Nuremberg 80 was heavily based on documentary source material. Here, in the Churchill Archives Centre, are a number of original documents relating to the trial, including the correspondence of the British prosecutor Sir David Maxwell Fyfe, and the papers of Hirsch Lauterpacht, a Polish Jewish academic on the British prosecution team, who came up with one of the most important of the trial's contributions to international law, the concept of crimes against humanity. The students were not just learning about history, they were learning about law, about argument and presentation, and how to think fast on your feet. The issues they were dealing with are, of course, only too relevant today. Some cases were not as straightforward as they looked. The cases of Albert Speer, who headed the huge construction work programme based on slave labour provided by his deputy Fritz Sauckel, have long aroused controversy. The suave, highly educated Speer evaded the death penalty. Sauckel, a working-class man of limited education, was hanged. In this exercise too, their cases sparked some drama.
Whatever is written, there is a reality that is different.
Yes, we totally understand and acknowledge that these exploitations did happen. But what we are arguing is it is not to the fault of Fritz Sauckel that these exploitations did happen, because he did prove by these documents that he did all in his power to ensure the protections of the workers. I don't know the exact specifics on the title page of Sauckel 16, but I believe it was Sauckel 16 that I had, but it was a decree that was sent out by Sauckel, and therefore the execution of that, he had already done his part in drafting the legislature, and the execution was not on his part.
I hear that. Okay, go on. Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, can I just check on that document you've been quoting or referring to?
Yes.
It says, on the face of it, as you say, therefore the Eastern workers must be treated correctly and justly. And for that reason, everything is to be avoided in the employment of Eastern workers, which might tend to increase the restrictions and hardships, so far in line with what you've said. But then it says, beyond those brought about by the war. And I'm just wondering, because that sounds to me like a bit of a catch-all. You could always say that some hardship which is imposed is produced by the war. So does that not weaken the force of what you're saying about this document?
Well, I do not believe it does, because given the background of Fritz Sauckel, he was, again, he started as a workers' man. He served in the as a sailor, and in 1933 he was appointed as Gautelier of his region, and as such he did not have the full educational background for drafting legislature, and I believe this is clearly his intent to try to make sure every bit is accounted for, but while also keeping the protections for the workers. Unfortunately, due to his lack of education in this regard, that did not pan out quite as he intended.
So I think you have more that you wanted to argue.
Yes.
Some of the most shocking evidence presented at Nuremberg was film footage from the liberated concentration camps. Much of it was filmed by the British filmmaker Sidney Bernstein and edited by Alfred Hitchcock. To talk about the use of film at the trial, we had Sidney Bernstein's son, David, and the highly distinguished broadcaster and historian of the trial, Sir John Tusa. We also had the filmmaker Sally Angel, whose award-winning feature Night Will Fall told the story of Sidney Bernstein's film, how it was made and what happened to it. The students also heard from Tom Blackmore, the grandson of the British prosecutor Sir David Maxwell Fyfe, about his grandfather's role and about the trial's legacy. This was an exercise to mark the 80th anniversary of the Nuremberg Trial. But it was a lot more than that. It was a truly interdisciplinary exercise involving history, law, and human rights, bringing together students and teachers from different countries with academics, lawyers, filmmakers, and actors. The students engaged with documents and photographs. They had to prepare reasoned argument, even for the most impossible cases. And they had to respond on the spot, both to the judges and to each other. Many of them were doing all this in another language. No wonder their teachers described the whole experience as inspiring, intellectually stimulating, immensely enriching, and often very moving.
But what do you think an experience like this, that is outside of the traditional classroom setting, outside of maybe the normal way that history is taught, what do you think this means for your students? What insights can this give them?
I think one of the skills they gain, one of the many skills, is that they can work in a different environment, that they can see and meet with peers from different cultural backgrounds, that they have absolutely can see what they have been working for in theory. And now they can just show it, say, okay, that's what I've been learning for the whole time. And I think that's something they need for the future, no matter what they will be doing.
Nuremberg 80 was very generously financed by private donors in the United States, by the Sir Winston Churchill Society of Edmonton, Canada, and by Churchill College. Without their support, it could not have happened. It would be wonderful if we could leave it there, if the issues dealt with at Nuremberg simply belonged in the past. But sadly, they are still very much with us. That's why we hope to take this exercise forward, to bring more students from more countries together, to use history, Nuremberg or other such cases, to look at war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide through the lens of law, using difficult and painful history to understand the world we live in today.